Hey Calvary, my name is Chris and I am the St. Charles campus pastor, and I am here to bring you a devotion from Galatians 2, specifically Galatians 2, 1 through 10. So to kick us off, I'm just going to read the passage and then we're going to talk about it a little bit and reflect a little bit. So starting in verse 1, it starts like this. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas. This is Paul talking, taking Titus along with me. I went up because of a revelation and set before them, though privately before those who seemed influential, the gospel that I proclaim among Gentiles, in order to make sure I was not running or had not run in vain. But even Titus, who was with me, was not forced to be circumcised, though he was a Greek. Yet because of false brothers secretly brought in, who slipped in to spy out our freedom that we have in Christ Jesus, so that they may bring us into slavery. To them we did not yield in submission even for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved in you. And from those who seemed to be influential, that they were makes no difference to me. God shows no partiality. Those, I say, who seemed influential added nothing to me. On the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been entrusted with the gospel to the circumcised. For he who worked through Peter for his apostolic ministry to the circumcised worked also through me for mine to the Gentiles. And when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave the right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and me, that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. Only they asked us to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. So this is Paul writing to the church at Galatia. In the context of Paul and Titus going before the council at Jerusalem, is that Paul, through prophecy, was told that there's going to be a massive famine in Judea and thus Jerusalem. So they're concerned that this famine is coming and that the poor will be afflicted because of it. So Paul brings with him two very important things. He brings a fat bag of money and he also brings Titus. Now, the money shows that even though there's a theological disagreement going on about how the gospel is to be shared with the Gentiles, they still have unity. Like, they're still on mission together, which I think is really important for us. Like, as we reflect, we're going to have things we theologically disagree on. We're going to have opinions that may not be in full alignment with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And yet, do we foundationally hold fast to the non-negotiables? Do we foundationally hold fast to the things that are important in the key doctrines and actions that are supposed to define the Christian life? And so that's a good reflection for us, that even in this council, this important meeting, which theological dispute is happening in Jerusalem, Paul still brings the bag of money. Like, they're on one accord of looking after the poor who are going to be afflicted by this famine in Judea and Jerusalem. And so even though Paul wants to run in his specific lane of ministering to the Gentiles, he still has this thing that we would call Catholicity. He still has this thing that we would call unity with the other leaders, most importantly Peter, in the church. So he brings a bag of money, which is important. Now he also brings Titus. Now Titus is a Greek. Titus is not circumcised. Titus is a pupil of Paul. He's a guy that Paul's discipling, just like Barnabas discipled Paul. And so Titus is important because Titus is a real and tangible example of grace. He's been converted, he's being raised up in the faith, but he's not Jewish, he's not circumcised. And this is what Paul's saying. He says, I'm trying to run in my lane to minister to the Gentiles. If you let the Judaizers have their way, then we are going to suppress this ministry with Jewish customs and Levitical laws that don't apply to the New Testament church. And you're going to stifle what God is trying to do in the Greek and Roman world. So as much as Paul is trying to find unity and be on the same page, he's also saying, I'm not going to budge. I'm not going to give an inch in the ways in which I'm convicted about how we should be ministering in the gospel, the good news of Jesus, going forth to the Greek and the Roman world. Now, he does this in theological discourse there in Jerusalem, but I think what really wins the day is Titus there being with him. Paul's saying, look at him. Look how he's being raised up in the faith. He's not, undergoing these Jewish rites and rituals, and yet look how Christ is using him. Look how Christ is looking to reach the Roman and the Greek world. So I think if we hold Titus and the bag of money that Paul brings in both hands, I think it brings us to a place of reflection and digging into what does it look like for us in our lives to own unity in the mission of the global and universal church. And what does it also look like for us to run in our own lane, to say, this is the way I'm wired, this is the soil God has called me to, and I'm not going to budge. I'm not going to give an inch on what I believe God is calling me to specifically in my life, but also I'm a part of a greater story and a greater body and a greater covenant people. It's not just all about me. I think Paul embodies this really well. And we see this in the last verse, verse 10. Only they asked us to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. So Paul, even in his specified calling, is not neglecting the foundational things that we can't get out of love God, love people, make disciples, care for the poor and the widows and the downtrodden. And so he finds this balance really well. So I think that's what I'm encouraging us to navigate and reflect on. Can we find the healthy space of belonging to a story bigger than ourselves, realizing we're not the hero, and at the same time, we're going to be giving a specific calling that we get to find life in and get to hold fast to. So that's what I have for us, Calvary. I hope this encourages you. I hope this gives you something to think on and is encouraging for you. I can't wait to see what God is going to do throughout this entire Galatians series for us as a church.